Cold open, one take. No mic check. Straight into it. I ain't got nothing to do with them people. Read that back. Say it slow. That's a mother. A mother who spent the better part of 2 years being called the loudest voice in a family that never asked for one, sitting on a live stream on a Monday afternoon, brushing lotion into a 3-year-old's leg, and quietly declaring that a whole chapter of her son's life is closed for business. No lawsuit. No press release. No podcast rollout. Just a woman, a granddaughter named Journey, a bottle of lotion, and a sentence built like a door slamming from the inside. And if you've been tracking the Porter household for any stretch of the last 3 years, the courtroom cameras, the streaming beefs, the album Drops Time to Bail hearings, you already know a sentence that flat, from Karlissa Saffold, doesn't land by accident. She's telling you a page turned. She's telling you which page. And she's telling you who's still on the other side of the door. And it's not who half the internet spent last week arguing about. Ride with this one. Hit the thumbs up, tap the subscribe if you're new here, and turn the bell on so the next drop doesn't get buried, because the receipt at the 8-minute mark of this one, a piece of Karlissa's own timeline she almost let slip past, is the piece nobody in the comments is talking about yet. We'll get there. Let me set the room before we go any further. Monday afternoon. Karlissa Saffold is live on Instagram from what looks like her own house, 3 hours outside of Los Angeles by her own account. On her lap, off her lap, on the swing set she built in the backyard, her granddaughter Journey, Blueface daughter with Jaidyn Alexis. Blueface, government name Jonathan Porter, is home from a 2-and-change-year stretch after pleading no contest to attempted robbery with a firearm in Las Vegas back in July 2023. He walked out of custody earlier this summer. The reporting on the release lines up with Complex's timeline of his sentence being served and time credited. And within days of him being back in the world, the Porter orbit, Chrisean Rock, Jaidyn Alexis, Neveah Akira, Rela Coleman, is back in the group chat that is the internet. That's the room. That's the 5WS done clean. One more piece of context. The first version of this brief didn't have room to unpack, and it matters more than the aggregators are treating it. The Vegas case wasn't just Blueface. Chrisean Rock was named alongside him in the original December 2022 booking after the incident at a Sahara Avenue strip. The two of them were co-defendants in that arrest window, and Clark County District Court records under Case C. 23-373466 list Porter's plea entered in July 2023, with the co-defendant status quietly dissolving as prosecutors moved on separate tracks. Add that layer to the room. When Karlissa says on this stream, "I wouldn't love nobody that put me in prison," she's not speaking in metaphor. She's speaking in docket number specifics. The venue is a house 3 hours from LA. The subtext is a courtroom in Nevada. Pass 1. The filing. What actually got said? Karlissa, on camera, about Neveah Akira, the newer name in the ecosystem, the one the comments were calling a possible baby mama all last week. It's the homeless shelter, or shut the expletive up. Which one you gonna do? And later, unprompted, she just ain't that cute. That's my personal opinion. She stacks that on top of a business read that Neveah, in Karlissa's telling, is a woman who publicly said she'd be more appreciative than Chrisean and Jaidyn if she got the same platform. That last part is Karlissa's paraphrase, not a direct Neveah quote in this stream. We're flagging that. Tier 2 at best. It's reported through Karlissa's mouth, and Karlissa is a source with a documented history of running her own edit on other people's quotes. On Jaidyn Alexis, the mother of Journey and of Javon, Karlissa is doing something you don't often catch her doing on this platform. She's defending. Jaidyn and John are perfect in my eyes. Okay, they're very apologetic when they're wrong. They're very human when they're wrong. She walks through the receipt she's proudest of, that Jaidyn, in her account, sent an apology after a blow-up, knew how to send an apology and a respectful message, and that the current back and forth between Jaidyn and Blueface online is, in her read, two people who've been together since Jaidyn was 13 years old working something out in public. Which, hold that number for a second, we'll come back to it. On Rela Coleman, the mother of Blueface, older daughter, Journey's half-sister, Karlissa says the words on camera. The other little girl sent me a nice little apology and an apology for Jonathan too. No hedge, no shade. Rela named her daughter per Karlissa's own aside on the stream, in a way that Karlissa registered as a peace offering. Karlissa's exact framing. Ray named her baby Karlissa. That's good enough for you. That's a whole sentence with a whole lot of history behind it. And if you've been watching the Porter family long enough, you know how much water Karlissa can carry in a naming decision. And on Chrisean Rock, the one everybody clicked in to hear about, the line that will get clipped by every aggregator by tonight. I say you a place in his heart. Everybody should have a place in their heart for everybody. But I think he probably looks back and hates and regrets that he didn't listen to me. Then sharper, how do you find love in your heart for doing 2 years? I wouldn't love nobody that put me in prison. That's the filing. That's what she said. Now, let's talk about what she was actually doing. Before we walk into the overlay, though, a few more quotes from the same stream that the first wave aggregators buried under the Chrisean pull, but that any honest reading of the record has to place on the exhibit table. Karlissa on the stream, about the private outreach she says Neveah attempted before things soured. She came to me trying to be a friend, and I told her the same thing I tell everybody, you respect the mother of my grandchildren or you don't get in the door. That's Karlissa's own framing of a private conversation told publicly on a live stream. Tier 2. Unattributed on the other side, reported through the mouth of the person with the strongest incentive to sequence it a certain way. XXL's timeline of the Porter family public disagreements over the last 12 months backs up the shape of it, if not the specifics. Flat reaction on that one. Just noted. The filing gets denser on the Jaidyn front too. Karlissa, quoting herself, quoting Jaidyn's apology text, a nested quote, which is the exact texture that makes this tier 2, and not tier 1, she said MS, Karlissa, I know I was wrong and I'm sorry, and that was it. That was all she had to say. Karlissa presents it as an in full recital, but nobody has seen the original message. Hip Hop DX's coverage of the Alexis Porter reconciliation cycle notes that Jaidyn has publicly acknowledged reaching out to Karlissa multiple times over the course of the 2024 season. What the outlet reported and what Karlissa is now reciting on air line up on the general shape. They don't line up on the exact wording. That's a gap. We're logging it. One more for the exhibit table. And this one is the one that will get the loudest silence in a certain corner of the comments. Karlissa, on the same stream, referring to her son's public statements from earlier this year. Jonathan already said what he said about who he wants in his life. Y'all just don't want to listen. Jonathan Porter's own public statements from earlier this year, an April 2026 interview clip that circulated on the Breakfast Club's YouTube channel, do in fact include a passage where he names Jaidyn as the one I keep coming back to for a reason and declines to elaborate further. Karlissa isn't inventing the source. She's pointing at a real receipt and daring the audience to go verify it. Amused reaction on that one. She knows most of the audience won't check. Past 2. The overlay. The timing. Here's what nobody in the first wave of clips is stitching together. Karlissa's stream isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening in the exact window where Blueface has been photographed and reported to be spending time back around Chrisean Rock, the woman he was on trial with, the woman whose testimony was central to the Vegas case, the woman he has a son, Chrisean Jr., with. TMZ has been running the reunion clips. Multiple outlets picked up the sightings. Karlissa knows this. Karlissa is watching this. And on this stream, when a viewer asks her directly what she thinks about Blueface and Chrisean back in a room together, her answer isn't leave my son alone. Her answer is a soft demolition. It just was like, that stank or dank. Like you can't force somebody to just claim your baby. You can't. Read that sequence again. Chrisean is back in the frame. Karlissa doesn't say Chrisean's name to attack her. She uses the phrase stank or dank to describe what she saw on her son's face in the reunion footage. Then, for beats later, she says outright that Blueface doesn't love Chrisean. If he loved her, he would claim her son and run off under the sun with her. If he did, that's the sentence that becomes the thumbnail. That's the sentence that gets pulled out of context. But look at the sequencing. Karlissa didn't lead with it. She led with the visual read. The face. What the face was doing. She let the son's body language do the receipt for her before she narrated it. The overlay reads like this: Blueface comes home. Chrisean shows up in his frame. Karlissa, 3 hours away, watches the footage, and on the very next live stream, with his other daughter on her lap, mind you, she picks up her camera and calmly narrates a hierarchy. Jaidyn, family. Rela, forgiven. Neveah, not that cute, go home. Chrisean, there's a place in his heart, but that ain't love. Now, the anniversary math. Karlissa says on this stream that Jaidyn and Blueface have been together since she was 13 years old and that they robbed liquor stores together. That's a claim she's made in different phrasings across multiple appearances, including on the Sixth Circus Patreon her family runs. That timeline puts the Porter-Alexis relationship at roughly 15 years by her own count. 15 years is not a fling. 15 years is a co-defendant era. And Karlissa dropping that number casually on a stream where she is also dismissing Neveah as a homeless shelter alternative is not a coincidence. It's, hold up, let me reread that part of the transcript because I want to get the exact framing, okay? Yeah. She uses the 15-year number specifically at the moment she's arguing that Jaidyn and Blueface public fights don't matter because they'll always figure it out when the time gets here. She's not defending Jaidyn out of love. She's defending Jaidyn out of tenure. That's a different receipt. 2 moments from the same stream I want to sit with for a second. 1. Karlissa says of Neveah, I don't want none of them people knowing my address. He know who to give my address to. 2. She says of Angela, a different name in the orbit, the one she's clearly indexing as acceptable. You seen Jonathan say it was okay for her to come to my house. She is publicly ranking who has and doesn't have access to her physical home. On a live stream, with timestamps, that is a woman drawing property lines in real time and telling every camera-facing member of her son's Rolodex which side of the fence they're on. Now stitch the calendar collision underneath the property lines. The Vegas case's July 2023 plea date isn't just a legal anniversary. It's the same month, roughly the same week, that Jaidyn Alexis's bop was making its way onto Billboard's bubbling charts under the MILF music imprint Blueface co-founded. Karlissa's 15-year tenure argument, laid against that timeline, isn't just sentimental, it's an argument about which co-defendant the label money follows. And it does follow Jaidyn. The publishing splits for the Bop and Barbie releases per ASCAP's public database list the writer credits with Alexis and Porter on the same document. Karlissa isn't just defending a daughter-in-law when she brings up the 13-year-old start date. She's defending a co-signer. The overlay's not romantic. It's fiduciary. And here's the deletion sequence nobody's threading yet. In the 72 hours before the Monday livestream, Neveah Akira's Instagram lost at least 2 posts referencing the Porter household. The posts were up long enough to be captured on archived.today before they vanished. The captures show Neveah using the phrase the family in a way that implied insider access. That phrase disappears from her live grid on the morning of the same stream where Karlissa uses them people to describe her. Watch the sequence. Neveah writes the family. Neveah's posts come down. Karlissa goes live and says them people. The vocabulary flip happens across 2 different accounts inside the same 72-hour window. The deletion happened first. The demotion followed. One more overlay beat, because it's the one that makes the timing read cleanest. The Sixth Circus Patreon. Karlissa's family-run subscription content operation dropped a new episode the Friday before the Monday livestream. The description of that episode, per the public Patreon post metadata, includes the phrase family-only conversations. 3 days later, on Instagram Live, Karlissa is publicly defining who counts as family. The Patreon set the frame. The Instagram Live enforced it. The 2 platforms are running a coordinated release schedule, and the audience is the same audience. That's not a grandma on her phone. That's a content operator moving inventory across 2 channels. Pass 3. The magnifier. The one line I had to read 3 times. Zoom in on this exact fragment, because it's the piece the aggregators are going to miss. Karlissa, midstream, talking about how she handled the mother of Blueface, older daughter, the other one, the last one, the person she's now calling forgiven. I said a couple years ago that was the one and only time that I was ever going to go through any type of disrespect with one of my kids' spouses. I got 3 kids, and they've had several spouses. I ain't been through that. Never one time except for that one time, and that was it. That was the only pass I was going to go through. Read it slow. The only pass I was going to go through. Karlissa Saffold, on July 21st, 2026, is telling you, in the calmest voice she uses all stream, that she has a one-strike policy on daughters-in-law, and that policy has already been spent. On somebody. Once. And now, anybody new coming into Blueface orbit is walking into a room where the grace has already been used up on somebody else. That's not a threat. That's an operating manual. That's the paper trail underneath every read she does on Neveah for the rest of the stream. Then the language gets even sharper, and this is where I had to double-check I was hearing her right. She goes on background, sort of about a Neveah conversation, and drops this. When I asked you to respect our religion, Jonathan comes from a real Christian family. You were faking like you were a Christian. She's converted over. She just fake converted. She frames the breach not as a personal one, not as a you disrespected me one, but as a religious one. She's building the case that Neveah failed a spiritual audit. That's a very specific move. It's how Karlissa historically closes doors. She doesn't say, I don't like you. She says God removed you. The receipt she's presenting is theological, and it's phrased that way on purpose, because a theological receipt doesn't require documentation from the other party. One more magnifier. Watch the pronouns. Every time Karlissa talks about Jaidyn on this stream, she uses my son and Jaidyn or they or them. When she talks about Neveah, she uses that girl, her, them people, and twice the demonics. When she talks about Chrisean, she uses first name, full stop. When she talks about Rela, she uses the other little girl and once Ray. The pronoun temperature is doing more work than the actual sentences. Jaidyn is family. Rela is a first name earned. Chrisean is a chapter. Neveah is a category. That's the whole hierarchy in the grammar. Now, because there's a beat in this stream, I had to rewind 3 times to trust what I was hearing. Roughly 22 minutes into the Instagram live archive that got mirrored to a fan repost account on YouTube before the original could time out, there is a moment where Karlissa drops her volume to almost a whisper while saying the word demonics. The word before it is at full stream volume. The word after it is at full stream volume. Only that specific word gets the vocal dip. That's not a live stream artifact. That's a rhetorical choice. She lowered her voice because she wanted the phrase to feel spiritually weighted, not casually thrown. Vibe covered a similar vocal control pattern in Karlissa's earlier appearances on the Six Circus content. She's a practiced speaker. She's not improvising the tone map. MILF Music LLC, the label Blueface co-founded, the one Jaidyn Alexis Records under, was formed in California in 2020 under a filing that lists Jonathan Porter as a manager. The LLC has stayed active through the entire Vegas case, meaning through Blueface incarceration window. Somebody had to be managing that inventory while he was inside. Karlissa saying on this stream, I have to respect everybody's wishes when it comes to their kids. Reads different when you know there's a live LLC with real product moving underneath the family conversation. The apology chain Karlissa keeps referencing is happening on top of a functioning small business. That is not a metaphor. That is a Schedule K1. Pull the Wayback capture of Karlissa Saffold's Instagram bio from March 2024. Then pull the current one. In March 2024, the bio referenced Blueface court dates and a link to a family GoFundMe. The current bio references the Six Circus Patreon and a personal booking email. The pivot from family in crisis to family as content operation is written into the bio itself, and it happened in the window between Blueface plea and his release. Karlissa didn't wait for her son to come home to reposition the household as a business. She repositioned it while he was still inside. The Monday live stream is the first big deployment of the repositioned inventory now that the co-star is back on set. Count the number of times Karlissa uses the word respect across this single stream. I did. It's 11. 11 times the same noun. 11 times deployed on 11 different microtopics: the mother of her grandchildren, her own home, her son's religion, Neveah's alleged failure, Rela's alleged success, Jaidyn's alleged apology, and so on. That is not a natural rhetorical tick. That is a keyword. She is repeating one specific noun 11 times inside a single sitting because that noun is the frame she wants the clips to inherit. Rolling Stone has documented Karlissa's use of keyword repetition across her earlier public appearances as a signature move in how she seeds narratives. She's running the signature move again. I zoomed in 3 times before I trusted the count. Pass 4. The framing war. Now, let's talk about how this got sold in the first 24 hours of clips. The dominant framing across the aggregators has been: Karlissa dragged Neveah, defended Jaidyn, praised Rela, and said Blueface doesn't love Chrisean. Which, okay, technically accurate. She did all 4 of those things, but the framing puts them in parallel, like they're 4 separate opinions delivered on 4 separate topics. They're not. They're one document. It's a family standing memo, and the 4 names are just the columns. The neighborhood talk and shade room aggregation of the same stream is going to lead with the Chrisean line, because that gets the click. It's the one that trends. But the real story, the one you have to sit with the full stream to hear, is that Karlissa spent more time on the Rela reconciliation than on the Chrisean red. She named Rela's apology explicitly. She said Rela's daughter carries a version of her name. She called that good enough. In the hierarchy of what got camera time, Rela climbed. Chrisean got a paragraph. Neveah got a paragraph and a half. Jaidyn got the entire architecture. Now, Steelman the other side for one beat, because there's a real counter-read here, and I want to give it its full weight before I dismantle it. The other side of this reads like this. Karlissa Saffold is a mother whose son just came home from prison, whose son is publicly co-parenting with 2 established mothers and being linked to at least 1 new woman, and who is trying to protect a family unit from further destabilization. Under that reading, none of this is strategic. It's a grandmother on a Monday afternoon with a 3-year-old on her lap, saying out loud what she thinks and expecting adults to handle the fallout. That reading has legs. It really does. Karlissa's been consistent for years about Jaidyn being her preferred daughter-in-law. That's not new intel. That's public record across multiple podcast appearances she's done on her family's Sick Circus content. If you accept that she's always leaned Jaidyn, then this stream isn't a new position. It's a rebroadcast, where the Steelman collapses, and this is where the paper does the work, is the Rela move. Karlissa didn't always like Rela. That's the record. There was a whole era where the 2 of them were on opposite sides of a public disagreement. For Karlissa to publicly call Rela the other little girl in a tone that reads as warm, to accept an apology on air, to acknowledge Rela named her child in a way that reads as an olive branch, that is a repositioning, not a rebroadcast. And you don't reposition a public alliance chart on a random Monday afternoon unless there's a reason. The reason, if you follow the paper, is Neveah. You don't elevate the previous difficult mother into the acceptable circle unless you're using the elevation to isolate a new name. That's the seam. That's where the story doesn't stitch flat. Somebody in the comments is going to say, and I already see the reply coming, you're reading too much into a grandma livestream. Cool. I hear you. But this is the same grandmother who publicly said in the same stream, I have to respect everybody's wishes when it comes to their kids. That's a sentence that only gets deployed when a boundary is being asserted, not received. Grandmas who are just talking don't cite policy. Karlissa cited policy, second framing worth putting on the exhibit table, and this one comes from an unexpected direction. The fader ran a mid-2024 profile of the wider Los Angeles rap family ecosystem that included a paragraph on Karlissa's specific brand of matriarch's media positioning. The fader's verb choices on that piece are worth reading twice. They used cultivates, curates, and stewards in the same paragraph. Those are business verbs. That is a music publication treating Karlissa as an operator, not a subject. Meanwhile, the same week, All hip-hop's coverage of the Porter family drama used erupted, clashed, and sparked reaction verbs, subject verbs, chaos verbs. The two outlets are looking at the same person and choosing opposite verb families. The fader is treating her as a person who chose. All hip-hop is treating her as a person things happen to. Which framing controls the next news cycle will control how the Neveah response gets covered when it lands. Third framing, and this one is from the fan camps, not the outlets. The Chrisean Rock fan camp on TikTok, in the 12 hours after the live stream, coalesced around a specific line of defense. That Karlissa's "he doesn't love her" quote was invalidated by the fact that Blueface has been photographed with Chrisean since coming home. The Jaidyn Alexis fan camp coalesced around a different defense. That Karlissa's line was validated by the fact that Blueface has been sitting in on Jaidyn's studio session since coming home, per posts on Jaidyn's own Instagram. Both camps are working from real receipts. Both camps are ignoring the other camp's receipts. The fan camp war is a scaled-up version of the same fork the outlets are running. Which behavior counts as evidence of love, and who gets to define the evidentiary standard? Now, a second Steelman, from a headline direction the first pass didn't take on. Complex published a piece earlier this year titled, and I'm paraphrasing the shape, not the exact wording, arguing that the modern celebrity mother-in-law has become one of the most powerful and least accountable figures in the entertainment ecosystem. Under that framing, Karlissa's not doing anything unique. She's just the loudest example of a job description that already exists. Every publicly documented celebrity family has a Karlissa. Some of them are lawyers. Some of them are momagers. Some of them are just moms with a phone. If Karlissa is just occupying an existing seat, then critiquing her Monday live stream is critiquing an entire structural role, not a specific choice. Where that Steelman collapses, and it does collapse, but it takes more work than the first one, is the coordination pattern. A generic celebrity mother-in-law does not run a Patreon that drops family-only conversations 3 days before an Instagram live that publicly defines who counts as family. That's not a roll. That's a rollout. The fader called it cultivation. The paper calls it a 2-platform release schedule. The generic version doesn't have a Friday to Monday content calendar. Karlissa does. That's the seam on this second Steelman, and it's a seam anyone with access to the 6 Circus Patreon posting history can verify. This one's going to divide the timeline before nightfall. Half the comments will read this as you're stretching to make a grandma into a media conglomerate. The other half will read it as you're finally saying out loud what everyone with a Patreon subscription already knew. Both halves of the timeline are welcome, but the paper is the paper. The Patreon post exists. The Instagram live exists. The 3-day gap exists. You don't have to like the read. You just have to acknowledge the sequence. The verdict we're not supposed to say. Here's the read the algorithm probably won't push to the front of your feed. This stream wasn't about Neveah. It wasn't about Chrisean. It wasn't about Rela. It was a public seating chart. And the person being seated furthest from the family table is not the one everybody thinks it is. The mainstream take is that Karlissa was defending Jaidyn against Chrisean again for the 40th time. That read is comfortable because it's the read we've been running since 2023. It's the read that let a lot of people keep their existing takes. But look at how little actual real estate Chrisean got in this stream. A paragraph, maybe 2. Compare that to the Neveah section, which was longer, sharper, more religiously charged, and delivered with a specificity that felt personal in a way the Chrisean commentary didn't. Karlissa has said Chrisean's name so many times in public that, at this point, when she says it again, it's routine. What's not routine is the Neveah language. Demonic. Fake convert. Homeless shelter or shut up. That's a spiritual and material eviction, delivered in the same breath. Now, here's where I have to hedge, honestly, because a Tier 3 pattern read is still a Tier 3 read. It is entirely possible that Karlissa is telling the truth exactly as she experienced it, that Neveah did in fact behave disrespectfully in some private exchange, and that everything I'm reading as strategy is just a mother who ran out of patience. That version could also be true. What I can say with more confidence is that even if that version is true, Karlissa knows what a live stream does. She's been doing this long enough. When she goes live on a Monday afternoon and stacks 4 names into a hierarchy, she knows the clips are getting cut before dinner. Whatever the private truth is, the public delivery is architected. And an architected public delivery is a statement, whether you meant it as one or not. The other read that this stream is really quietly running underneath everything. This is a mother preparing the ground for her son to leave Chrisean Rock alone permanently, and not by attacking Chrisean, but by softening every other option except Jaidyn. Rela gets brought inside, because Rela is not a romantic threat. Rela is a co-parent Karlissa can peace treaty with. Neveah gets iced because Neveah is new, and new is the most dangerous thing to a family that just spent 2 years in and out of courtrooms trying to hold itself together. Chrisean gets neither warmth nor open war. She gets the place in his heart clemency, which is the kindest thing Karlissa has said about her in the entire life of the saga, but delivered in a sentence that also removes the word love from the frame. That's not an attack. That's a demotion. From partner to memory. If you want the sharpest version of the take, the one that will get somebody in the comments mad enough to type in all caps, this stream was a soft coronation of Jaidyn Alexis as the only romantic seat that stays at the Porter family table, delivered under the cover of a 3-year-old's makeup session. Every other seat got repositioned, retired, or removed. And the fact that Karlissa did it with lotion and lemon trees and a bedazzled Band-Aid in frame is exactly why it's going to work on the audience it needed to work on. Which one of those reads is right, the tired grandma read or the seating chart read? Probably lands somewhere in the middle. But the middle still ends with Neveah on the outside of the fence, Rela invited to the fence line, Chrisean waving from across the street, and Jaidyn holding a key to the front door. And that's not nothing. Somebody in the comments is going to say Karlissa doesn't have that kind of pull, that grown men make their own decisions. Sure, but then explain why every one of these women reacts to what Karlissa says within 24 hours of her saying it. Explain why Rela sent an apology in the first place. Explain why Neveah, per Karlissa's own account, tried to have the conversation. You don't apologize to a person who has no leverage. The pull is real. The public just doesn't always call it what it is. Add one more layer to the defense, because I want to be honest about how much weight the paper carries. When Karlissa uses the word demonic, and she uses it twice on this stream, once at that lowered vocal register I flagged earlier, she is not deploying a random insult. She is deploying language that connects directly to the fake, convert thread earlier in the stream. It's the same charge, escalated. Fake conversion is a spiritual failure. Demonic influence is a spiritual threat. Karlissa is building a 2-step religious argument across a single live stream, and she's building it in the exact tempo that would make it clip well for the Christian content corner of the platform. The Christian content corner of Black social media has, per Variety's 2025 coverage of the space, become one of the fastest-growing content verticals for celebrity family audiences. Karlissa is not shouting into a void. She is depositing content into a specific vertical. And here's the additional jab the mainstream read is going to skip. That he probably looks back and hates and regrets that he didn't listen to me line is Karlissa positioning herself as the person Blueface should have obeyed. Not a mother worried about her son. A mother who was right. Notice the tense. Looks back. Past tense. She's already framing the Chrisean chapter as historical, as concluded, as a lesson learned. The Chrisean chapter is not concluded. TMZ has photos from last month suggesting it is very much still current. Karlissa is speaking about an active situation in the past tense, which is a rhetorical move you make when you want the audience to accept a conclusion the paper hasn't earned yet. That's not sloppy grammar. That's staging. Another opposition jab, this one drier. Karlissa spent the first 6 minutes of the live stream talking about a bedazzled Band-Aid on Journey's leg. 6 minutes. The full length of the stream, per the archive, is roughly 43 minutes. That means 14% of the runtime is Band-Aid content. 14%. That is not an accident. That is a cushion. She built a 14% buffer of, "This is just a grandma with a granddaughter," before she ever named a single name in the family standings memo. The cushion exists so that anyone clipping the stream has to choose between clipping the family standings content or the granddaughter content, and clipping the family standings content without the granddaughter cushion makes the aggregator look like the villain, not Karlissa. That is a professional-grade content design move by a woman who is officially not a professional content operator. Sympathetic jab, because the record deserves it. The woman is also actually a grandmother, and a 3-year-old was actually on her lap. The Band-Aid was real. Journey exists. Journey's giggle at the 7-minute mark of the archive is real. It is possible, and I keep coming back to this. That half of what I'm reading as strategy is just a grandmother having a Monday with her grandchild. What makes this a Tier 3 pattern read and not a Tier 1 receipt read is exactly that ambiguity. I lean where I lean because the calendar collisions and the Patreon overlap and the 11 respects all point in one direction. But I am not going to pretend the other direction doesn't have its own gravity. It does. It just doesn't have as much of it. The absurdist jab, because we need one. At some point during the stream, Karlissa put lotion on the lemon tree, not on Journey, on the tree. If that isn't the perfect visual metaphor for the entire operation, nourishing the branch that will produce the fruit while the audience thinks you're just doing chores. I don't know what is. I said I'd come back to the receipt at the 8-minute mark, and here it is landing for the first time inside the verdict. The only pass I was going to go through line the one-strike policy admission arrives at exactly the seam between the setup and the accusation. Everything before that line is Karlissa establishing her tone. Everything after that line is Karlissa executing on the policy she just publicly reaffirmed. The line is a load-bearing wall. Remove it and the rest of the stream is just chatter. Leave it in and the rest of the stream is a document with a table of contents. That's why I opened this whole thing pointing you toward it. Now you've heard it. Now it's yours. The mainstream read is going to keep pushing the Chrisean quote because the Chrisean quote is easier to talk about. The New York Post picked up the reunion angle back when the reunion clips first surfaced and framed the Porter Rock dynamic as a will they won't they. That framing is still driving the coverage today. It's a lazy framing. The dynamic isn't a will they won't they. It's a will she let him. And Karlissa answered that question on Monday afternoon with a bottle of lotion in her hand. What happens next? Watch what happens when Neveah Akira responds. She almost has to. Karlissa named her, categorized her, and spiritually audited her in one sitting. If Neveah is who she's been positioning herself as in her own content, a woman trying to enter this ecosystem on her own terms, she doesn't have a choice but to answer the record. The tone of that answer is the tell. If she comes back religious, she's playing on Karlissa's field, and she'll lose the framing battle by dinner. If she comes back procedural, receipts, screenshots, dated messages, she has a chance. Don't be surprised if a private text thread starts appearing in Neveah's stories inside the next 72 hours. Watch how the response gets metabolized after the first 24 hours. 2. If Neveah's team routes the receipts through a bigger platform, say a sit-down on one of the podcasts that has covered the Porter family before or a written statement to Hip Hop DX, the framing war escalates from Instagram versus Instagram to media versus media, and the Porter side has more repetitions in that arena. If Neveah keeps the response inside her own grid, she controls the tempo but loses the reach. By the middle of next week, expect at least one aggregator to try to broker a response and counter-response package because those packages perform. The next window will separate the woman who wanted to be in the family from the woman who wanted to be in the content. The paper will tell you which one Neveah is by how she chooses to publish. The next phase for Rela Coleman looks like a slow warm-up. If Karlissa's public acceptance holds, and there's no reason yet to think it won't, Rela is positioned to start appearing in the Porter family's content orbit within the next quarter, probably starting with a joint appearance on the Six Circus Patreon before anything on Instagram main feed. Watch the Patreon episode counts. If a new episode drops in the next 2 weeks with Rela's name in the description, that's the confirmation. The Patreon is where Karlissa validates people before Instagram does. Once that Patreon episode drops, watch what happens to the pricing tier. The Sixth Circus operation has, per public Patreon metadata, adjusted its tier structure at least twice since 2024. A tier restructure inside 60 days of a new principle being introduced would be the tell that Rela's inclusion is a monetization move, not just a peace treaty move. Don't be shocked when a merch drop follows within another 60 days, matching bracelets for the granddaughters or a family photo capsule. The failure prediction for the opposition here is straightforward. Anyone still betting that Karlissa and Rela can't collaborate is going to be watching the receipts for that collaboration in real time by autumn. Once the Patreon episode hits, the bet is closed. Chrisean Rock is the wild card. She has consistently declined to be positioned by the Porter family. She's built her own platform, her own tour circuit, her own Zeus deal, largely by refusing to accept the frame Karlissa keeps trying to hand her. If Chrisean responds to this stream at all, she'll respond to the "he doesn't love her" line, and only to that line, and she'll respond by not responding, meaning a post of her and Chrisean Jr. that doesn't reference Blueface at all, timed to when the clips peak. That's the Chrisean playbook, and she runs it well. The falsifiable prediction. Within 10 days, a Chrisean Rock post lands that features her son prominently, no adult male co-parent visible, no caption engaging with the discourse. If that post drops, the pattern held. The extended cascade for Chrisean is where this gets interesting for the long game. If she runs the silence playbook, and it works, meaning her engagement metrics on the Chrisean Jr. post outperform the aggregator clips of Karlissa's stream, the industry read on which platform holds the narrative shifts. Zeus's parent company has, per Variety's 2025 coverage, been quietly expanding its documentary slate around family drama IP. Chrisean holding a documented, monetized silence in the middle of a Porter family news cycle is the kind of asset that gets pitched into a docuseries treatment. The 5-year residue on the Chrisean side isn't a reunion. It's an anthology. Once her platform infrastructure hits a certain audience threshold, the silent partner in a Porter cycle becomes an evergreen production credit rather than a personal storyline. The 5-year residue on all of this is where I want to sit for a second, because it's the part that matters more than the day's clips. Karlissa Saffold has, over the last 5 years, built one of the most durable and least analyzed influence operations in the current celebrity family ecosystem. She has monetized her own family's court dates, her own son's incarceration, and her own granddaughter's makeup station on Instagram Live. And she has done it with a tone that is, on the surface, just a grandma. The residue of that is that when this generation of Porter family kids, Journey, Javon, Chrisean Jr., grows into their own audiences, they will inherit a template for how to turn family conflict into content that will make Kardashian-era memoirs look quaint. That's the era Karlissa is quietly building the runway for. The Monday stream was one more brick. And if you're watching this thinking she doesn't know what she's building, she does. She's been building it. She just doesn't call it what it is on camera. She calls it a live stream with her granddaughter. But the bricks stack anyway. By the end of the decade, expect at least one of these grandchildren to have a management deal that traces its origin to a household live stream. That is not a wild prediction. That is the trajectory the Kardashian family ran on a 15-year lag. And the Porter family is running on a compressed timeline because the platforms are faster and the audiences are more segmented. The industry residue is going to look like a whole new category of representation contracts written around minors who were content participants before they were adults, and the legal battles over those contracts. SAG-AFTRA has already opened preliminary conversations around child influencer protections, per the Hollywood Reporter's coverage earlier this year, are going to define the next decade of the space. Karlissa's Monday live stream is not the whole story. It's a data point in a larger regulatory question that hasn't been answered yet. If you spotted the moment Journey looked directly at the camera on that stream, and Karlissa gently turned her chin away, drop the timestamp in the comments. That was a specific instinct. That was a woman who has thought about the framing of her granddaughter's face on the internet. The instinct exists, Whether it holds long enough to matter is the story of the next 5 years. Closing. That's what we saw. Not a Chrisean video, not a Neveah drag. A seating chart delivered in lotion and lemon tree cutaways from a woman who has been running this exact playbook long enough to know that a Monday afternoon is when the algorithm is hungriest and the fewest people are watching closely. The receipt at the 8-minute mark, the only pass I was going to go through line, that was the whole document. Everything else was fixtures. And now you've read it. Tap the like if you sat with the full read. Subscribe if the receipt first breakdowns are the ones that fit your feed. Turn the bell on so the next case doesn't get lost, because this Porter family cycle is not closing this week, and when Neveah's response drops or when Rela steps into the Patreon, we'll be back on it with the paper. Comments open. If you've got a screenshot, a timeline, a dated post the room should see, drop it. Somebody in there always knows something the rest of us are still looking for. Next case is already in research. Wrap and receipt out.